Hey, today here on Everyone Needs a Guide, we have Devin Murfasi. He's with Murfasi Law Office. I'm going to let him introduce himself, tell him a little bit about what he's got going on and what he does. But he's a real estate attorney, and he helps a lot with different transactions. When I have stuff pop up, he's even helped me with a little bit in my own personal stuff. That's why I brought him in here. But before we get into that, if this is your first time to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Then also hit that little bell so that you'll get notifications of future interviews, because we're going to be bringing you different people that are going to be able to help you with your home buying process in the Kansas City area or your home selling process in the Kansas City area. I'm a licensed realtor. I can help you out with that stuff, and I can also help find you the guys that you need to make it as easy as possible for you. So let's get into it. Devin, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, and really tell us why you got into real estate law.
Absolutely. Devin Murfasi, born and raised in Kansas City. I love it. I've actually lived on both sides of the river, so I feel like I'm pretty well versed. I went to law school at UMKC, so stayed local, and really always have had a passion for real estate, and that's kind of what led me to do a lot of real estate law. I've owned residential real estate in the past, as well as I own a lot of commercial now. So, one, knowing the law helps me run my own business, but I really enjoy helping people as well. I really do love the people aspect of the business. So, having my own firm, I'm able to really focus on that and steer it in the direction that I want. So.
Yeah, which I would assume helps a ton if you're dealing with rentals and other stuff, is being able to understand the law and interpret it. And then it helps you stay on top of how you can help your clients as well.
Absolutely, 100%. Again, I see stuff that I have to deal with personally. So I'm not only giving legal advice when I meet with my clients, I can also speak from practical experience, because one thing I've noticed in the practice of law, what you learn in the book and the way it works in real life is quite different.
I think that's with anything. I preach it all the time. Is we take the real estate test, or I've had a real estate license, insurance license, and a lending license, and in every one of those, you take the test, and then 50% of that stuff you never use again. And it's just crazy, because it's like, hey, you need to know all these laws and all this stuff, but the reality is you normally deal with a handful of things, and it stays those handful of things. But you got to know enough to, when that one-off pops up, you know how to handle it.
Absolutely.
So what are three common things that you see, and you don't have three, but what are the most common things that you see with real estate in the Kansas City area that pop up on that you end up having to have a lawyer get involved in?
So I see a lot of landlord-tenant issues where it comes time for an eviction or the end of a lease. So if you own rental real estate, it's very important to have a concrete lease up front. So many times, I actually just came straight from court this morning handling an eviction, and again, the lease needs to be bulletproof. You need to actually practice what the lease says, because if not, then you can set off create a lot of other issues for yourself that makes it hard to enforce.
Correct. If you have something written and you're not performing, essentially, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that essentially puts you in default of that contract, right?
Yeah, I do have to say I'm speaking kind of on personal experience here. I can't give legal advice in this. My best advice is to meet with an attorney. But so I'm speaking in general here. But yeah, you want to make sure you follow the lease. Then I have a lot of people that come who are in the process of being evicted or want to break a lease, or they think that their landlord has violated the lease in some way and they want to get out of it. The key there is you got to document everything. You can't just say, oh, I had this issue for 4 months. You need to send emails to your landlord and do stuff like that. And then when it comes to the
I think I want to touch on that. You said a really key point that people need to pay attention to. Email it. Don't just say, write it down in your sticky notes and say, on this day we did this. Make sure you put that on paper, because once you put it on paper, say or put it on email or electronic or text or something, it's there forever.
Yeah, and your goal is to create a paper trail. And again, at the first signs of this, you could speak to an attorney and they could help you how to
Create a paper trail.
exactly. Then jumping to on the buy-sell side of real estate, when what I see coming is contractual questions when it comes to closing. Somebody didn't perform. Again, the Missouri-Kansas contracts, they're very similar. Most all real estate agents use them.
Yeah.
In general, they're pretty good, but there are concerns when it comes to someone wanting to back out of the contract and reasons for that. It's really important to not make assumptions that time. Your agents are experts when it comes to the real estate and writing the contracts, but when it comes to the enforcement, that's when I would really say you also want to talk to an attorney. And I think any good realtor knows where their expertise end and when they should recommend that you talk to an attorney.
And that's part of the entire, I mean, heck, that's written into every contract that we do anyways, is we're not attorneys and we can't give you legal advice. So you're going to have to talk to an attorney if you want legal advice on how to handle certain situations. But I do believe those contracts are left up to interpretation. Like our office has a lot of interpretation meetings and trainings, and it's surprising how you put even 7 people in a room that all have similar backgrounds or maybe not, and you're reading the same thing and it's interpreted 7 different ways. And I think that just goes back to having bulletproof contracts, whether it's leases or anything like that. And it's easier to do that stuff up front than to get burned. And I've seen that a lot. People take on rentals. They look up a lease agreement online and they don't really read the lease agreement. They kind of look through it and then they correct and put the stuff in there and they're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And then they have an issue. They go to enforce it and they take one look at it and they're like, where'd you get this from?
I've seen a lot of examples of that where somebody goes to Rocket Lawyer or LegalZoom and pulls something off and they think they have a great contract, but again, it's not enforceable, or there's a variety of issues with it. So another thing I don't think people realize is the legal process takes time and money. So a lot of times it's better to, even if you're wrong, sometimes it's better to try to come to some sort of resolution than to incur the expense or, take the time to adjudicate the case. With my clients, I try to be as upfront as possible and just tell them the possible outcomes and realistically how long something could take when I talk to them, because that is a factor that should be considered when they make any decision.
Yeah, and I think that transparency bodes well when you're trying to take care of people and making sure they know what the risks are. Because anytime you take on a project or anything, there's different risks. And if you're looking at a lawsuit, I used to work in insurance. I had an insurance agency, and I had people that would get frustrated because we'd pay these small claims, even though there was it felt like there was some gray area to where like, hey, we shouldn't have paid on that or whatnot. And it's like, it's going to cost more to go to bat for this than it is to just pay that claim. And so you see that a lot in the insurance.
Definitely. I also do some personal injury or comp law, so I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all a little bit crazy. So what are some things that if people are looking at getting into contracts, whether they're buying houses, selling houses, or they are looking at getting into rentals, what are some things not to do? And I want to preface this by saying our entire goal here is to give people an education level to where they can make decisions. But essentially, you need to contact an attorney, whether it's Devin or somebody else. And we're not giving you legal advice. We are just trying to give you some education so that you can make good decisions and you can go find somebody that's going to help you make even better decisions. But what are some common things that you think people shouldn't do when they're looking at getting into contracts?
Sure. As a landlord, I would not recommend downloading something off the internet. You want that to have been reviewed and prepared by a lawyer so that you know that it's enforceable in the states that you're in. I've seen people try to use them across states. Again, there's different laws in every state. When you're signing a rental agreement, if you're, like say, trying to rent an apartment, there's some boilerplate language in there that, again, you're renting from a big company. They do this a lot, and they're going to it's going to be completely skewed in their favor. So you should really have that looked at that time. I can't tell you how many times somebody wants to get out of something, and then I look at it, and it's just so one-sided, and like there's not a lot I can do here. When it comes to buy, sell a real estate, again, if you're, it kind of depends if you're an investor or just looking for your own home. Again, excuse me.
Are you good?
The realtors will know a lot, and they'll be helpful in drafting that real estate sales contract. I would just say that if you're a seller, make sure that you're getting a good earnest money up front. That helps you that when the deal falls through a lot of times. And also try to get some information on the person who's purchasing the house. If you want to make sure that they're a strong buyer, and as much information as you can gather on them, that would be important in my opinion, so that the deal is a fall through.
And I think that's huge. I think especially now with how interest rates and different stuff is starting to climb up, and you're seeing a lot more of contracts backing out. You're not seeing as much cash being thrown around in the market as there was a year and a half ago. And so you do have to, like, there's a lot of people taking PA, USDA, the more non-conventional loans, and you do have to have an understanding of what that buyer looks like, and make sure that they are putting up my rule of thumb has always been 1%. So if they're putting down at least 1% of whatever the contract is, that's better. I mean, obviously the more is better. The more you can put down as an earnest money is better, but normally my minimum is at least 1%.
Sure, and yeah, the more the better. Obviously, it's a balancing act because people generally, when they're purchasing, they're trying to stretch and get as much house as they can, and a lot of times they don't have all that earnest money to put down. But
correct.
Again, a strong buyer generally does. I don't want to speak in absolutes.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any absolutes out here in the market right now. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are changing and moving, and every contract is going to be different, and you have to take each contract with a grain of salt. And you have to see what other factors are playing into it. Is there appraising gaps? Is there inspections? What are they putting down on, like, their loan? What type of loan is it? Is it conventional, non-conventional? Is it 30-year note? Is it somebody that's trying to do a 15-year note? Like, we look at all of those things and review those. I got an Excel spreadsheet. If we end up in multiple offers, we sit down and say, hey, here's what all the offers are. These are the ones that I think are the strongest. Ultimately, it's your decision. You can pick whichever one. And sometimes there will be agents that will take more feedback of who the person is. I try not to do too much of that just because I don't ever want to influence somebody to make a contract just because of the type of person that it is. Because people can be deceived.
Yeah, and again, I'm not definitely not saying based on the person. I just there's multiple factors that come into play, and again, I think your process sounds good where you try to identify what's strong and what's not.
Yeah, and the numbers don't lie. So if they're a strong buyer and you've got all of that sitting there in front of you and they're putting 20% down, I mean, numbers don't lie. Now, if you're looking at, on the flip side of that, I like to work with a lot of buyers that are very on this brim of how am I going to buy a house? And they're in those more non-conventional ways. They don't have a ton of cash, those type of things. And in those situations, I agree. You submit it with a letter and you try to get them every little piece that you can to maybe persuade somebody. Because at that point in time, we are bound to give the entire offer, the full offer. Unless the seller says, hey, we're not accepting letters from the people. But if you want to try to persuade somebody to take your offer, do it. Because I personally, I'm never going to say, hey, take this because of this person. Just because I've been burned in those situations where you have faith in somebody and then they don't do it. But I would always, you got to present every part of the offer.
Yep.
So let's jump off of this a little bit on the law talk a little bit and get into a little bit about what you have perspective of the Kansas City area. So what are some good places that you think, if somebody's looking to move to the Kansas City area, what are some good places that you think they need to check out?
Sure. I'm a little biased. I used to compete in barbecue, so I think checking out the restaurants are that's a really important thing. You can go with the classics, Gates and Arthur Bryant's, and then if you want the more craft, new age barbecue, Slaps and KCK or Q39 are great spots.
Okay, awesome. So you used to compete around the Kansas City area. Like, what did that look like?
At my peak, I competed like 9 out of 11 weekends and drove anywhere from local to 5 hours for a competition. And basically the barbecue week was Wednesday through Saturday night late, get a little bit of sleep, catch up on Sunday, and then work a couple days and do it all over again. So
I bet. So how did you get started in that? Was it like a family interest, or was it just you decided, hey, I want to get into this?
Oh, a buddy of mine, we decided to cook one day, and then I was like, hey, maybe we should try a competition. And we did incredibly average. In fact, I think we took exactly middle of the road. And then we decided to do one more contest that year, and we ended up getting second in brisket. So then we thought we were really good. And then that led to a big investment in the off season and more competition.
That's awesome. So at your peak, what were you guys taking home every week? Were you looking at first to second, or where were you falling?
There was a streak where we were pretty hot, and we peaked at like 30th in the nation at brisket.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I bet I am definitely coming over to your house for that.
I'm many years removed from that, but it was a good time.
Is it something that you lose? I don't know. Is it like most of the time when people, once they learn how to do it, with the smoking and the barbecue and stuff, they don't really ever lose it, from my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into competition barbecue. I can cook well. If I were to go out on the circuit or something, I'd probably score well in like 1 or 2 meets, but overall not do well. You'd have to kind of figure out the flavor profile that's hitting for the judges. But that being said, if I had people over for dinner, I think the majority of them would like everything that I prepared.
Yeah, I just think if you've had some sort of professional, it's kind of like anybody that's been a professional athlete or anything. Then they go and play at their local rec gym, and they're still going to dominate everybody, even if they're 50. Yeah, there's just a level of expertise that you just can't lose, even if you're not doing it every.
Sure.
So, what are some things what are some things about the Kansas City area? Being here your whole life, surely you got some complaints. What are some things that do you think people should be prepared for if they're looking at moving to the Kansas City area?
Um, one thing that's great about Kansas City is that we have the 4 seasons. The a bad thing is that the winter seems to
Come in 1 week.
drag out, and you can experience all four in 1 week. So, you know, my dad just recently moved to California to get some better weather, and I get it, but so that can be a little rough. I don't love that now that I grew up in South Kansas City, Johnson County, and then now north of the river. That river is a big divide. I hope in the future that can really, you know, both sides can. It just seems like a huge barrier. So I don't find myself coming down south too much anymore. And I hope that changes, because I have a lot of friends that live out there. And then when I tell them, hey, I live in Riverside, which is actually not that far, and you know, they kind of like, oh, I don't want to do that. That's too far.
Is that the big divide that you feel it is? Is like just that you have to drive across the river?
Yeah, I've personally experienced both sides of it. So, you know, when I grew up, I didn't go north of the plaza, and now it's coming past the river. I'm here. We're here though.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's definitely a difference, and I think that's in real estate you see it a lot. Like, people want to know where they want to be, and if you don't know where you want to be, you just have to essentially give. You're talking about giving judges, figuring out what their flavor profile is, and then custom building it to them. What we do in real estate is figure out what the client profile is. So if they're looking, whether they're looking for maybe an older community, well established, whether they're looking for older homes, they like ranches, and where they like 2 stories, or whatever that is that they like, and the feel for the environment that they want to be in, and how strict is the HOA, all that type of stuff goes into it, and then we can say, hey, these neighborhoods are the ones you need to check out. Because sometimes you're just looking online, you're like, oh, this house looks nice. And then you figure out what that neighborhood actually has to offer. And you're like, yeah, I don't know if I want to be there. Like, especially when you're working with an older generation or whatnot, they don't necessarily want to live in a cul-de-sac where there's kids playing hockey out there in the driveways every weekend. So wow. And they deserve their peace. They've lived a long life. So
sure,
I've seen a lot of situations like that, and it's just building a profile for each buyer. So if you're looking to move to the Kansas City area and you don't necessarily know where you want to go, 1, you got to figure out which side of the river you want to be on, and then 2, it would be figure out what community are you looking for, and articulating that to your agent, whether it's me or somebody else, and then making sure that they have the ability to understand the market so that they can go find whatever you need. Now, so is that really the big things that you don't like about the Kansas City area, or that you feel like people should be prepared about? Is that all you got?
I mean, for the most part, I really do like Kansas City as a city. I mean, it has so much to offer it's a small city, but you know, you have a lot of the perks of the big cities, like the sports teams, and again, it's really up and coming. I had a lot more complaints prior to like 20 years ago, but you know, they've developed a downtown. Like, while I was in school, I lived downtown, so I enjoyed that experience. Got dogs now, so I moved to the suburbs. But in general, I think Kansas City is a great city. There were a lot of complaints about the airport. We solved that issue a couple weeks back, maybe last month. So, honestly, I encourage it for anybody. I think.
Yeah, that's the thing about Kansas City is it is it's a huge market already, but it's growing and it's expanding. They're talking. There's a lot of talks about expanding even further into the Northland, which is on the north side of the river, and into Kearney and Smithville and all those areas. And it's just growing so fast. And like you said, they're just trying to stay ahead of changes as well, with the airport and everything like that. So that's one thing that I like about the area is they're always have somebody that's willing to grow.
Yeah, and again, I think there were times where there was more to dislike, but the the city itself is just on fire right now with championships and new infrastructure, streetcar expansion, all that good stuff. It's really doing a lot of the right things. So
Yeah, I mean, it does help that the Chiefs are killing it. That helps everything. Helps everybody's atmosphere. You don't see anybody that's walking around that's super sad in the Kansas City area because everybody's excited. We just came off championship.
right.
And we're going to go back and do it again next year.
Yep.
So with living here your whole life, what are some things that, and you got into it a little bit there, but what are some things that you really love about the area that you think the Kansas City people have to offer if somebody's looking at moving from one of those coasts?
Sure. I've touched on it. We got the really good sports teams. I think, believe it or not, probably the most exciting sporting event that you could go to is a Sporting Kansas City game. A lot of people, they're big on the football and baseball, but that experience, if you go to that stadium, is awesome. That the soccer crowd is really rowdy but fun, knowledgeable. We have a lot of good restaurants, good fine dining for a city our size. Again, even outside the barbecue, there's tons of stuff to hit downtown, and we have little pockets of town that all have their own area of expertise.
Is there any places that you know of that you think would be good for if somebody's just coming to, say they're coming in for a couple of days to look at some houses or what? What are some attractions that you think they should go see?
The World War I Memorial is really nice. Along with Union Station, you can knock those two out in one day. They're pretty much side by side. You can catch the streetcar to them if you're in the downtown area. I think those are some really neat things to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's hop back in a little bit to what I need in here to talk about is real estate law and just how people should handle stuff. At what point do you feel like they should get you involved for an attorney in general?
Sure. Again, it goes back to the things we've kind of touched on, but if you're a landlord, you're renting, obviously you want that contract reviewed and to make sure that's enforceable and still what you think. Before you're going to sign any contract, it's good to have that reviewed by a lawyer because, again, I assure you, if the other side is drafting it, it's going to be written in their favor almost always. So, and there's stuff that they'll throw in there that isn't really fair to you. So, again, it might cost you a little bit up front, but it can save you thousands down the road, time and money. So, in that case, when it comes to buying or purchasing, obviously, if you're an investor, you want a realtor a lawyer on your team in addition to your realtor that can help you with the overall business decisions and kind of an idea. If you own real estate, you might want to own it in an LLC. I can help draft or draw up the documents for that. They'll need an operating agreement. It might be a partnership. Again, there's legal documents that are required for all those different entities that you might want. When it comes to a dispute between buyer and seller, you kind of know when it's going south, and that's probably the best time to engage. Or, again, if you're working with a knowledgeable realtor, sometimes they might give you the nudge and tell you it's the right time.
Correct. And I think there's so many other things that could come into a real estate transaction that you've got to reach out to a lawyer for. And that's, I think if you're a realtor, you need to have a real estate lawyer on your team as well. Just somebody that you can throw out there and spitball ideas. Because I know I call you randomly, first shoot you a text and say, hey, what do you think about this? And you're like, maybe we need to touch on this, or you should be fine on that, or hey, I can do this. Because I know you've drawn up an easement, a couple easements for me, and also party wall agreements are something that's huge, especially if you're, because one big thing that's becoming a little bit more common is people selling one side of a duplex, and then you have to have something in there that states how that's going to be maintained and how you're going to keep all parties happy. So you just want to be able to talk through those with people. So if you're a real estate agent or an investor, like you're saying, if you don't have somebody on your team, I'd say reach out to this guy, because he's going to be able to help your customers a lot, or your clients a lot better, or help your business a lot better. So with that being said, we've touched on a lot today. What is, if somebody's looking for a real estate lawyer, this is essentially, what's your elevator pitch? Why should they come to Murphashi Law Offices?
Sure. I appreciate that question. That's great. I feel like all the attorneys in our office are really personable, and have our client's best interest at heart. We listen to the client, we understand their needs, and then we put a solution together that works for them and that is cost effective. It's not our goal to just try to run up a bill just because we can. We really want to tackle everything that the client needs, meet those, and then give them something that they're happy with, and so that they don't have to come back to us with other issues.
Correct. And I'm gonna give you a shout out to you as well, because I really appreciate it, and this is why I would tell you to go use Devin, because I recently had a transaction to where I needed an easement written up, and Devin ended up being sick the day that I needed it. And I was like, hey, I need this. And he's like, okay, I'm heading to the office. And he ended up, while he's sick, I don't know exactly the extent to what it was, but he ended up going in, taking care of it, getting it over to me. So that way it kept my stuff on time, so that way I could close on time and have everything ready to go. And that's huge if you're a real estate agent and you're looking for somebody I think you need to have it on your team. Everybody does need a guy. That's why I started this, is so that I can get it out there, the people that I work with, because my team is huge and always expanding, because I want to have multiple resources that can educate people and help them anytime they need. I really appreciate you coming out and sitting down here and giving some education to the viewers. If this is your first time to the channel and you really like this video, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and then also hit that little bell so you'll get notifications of future interviews, as we're trying to educate you on some people that can help your transactions go the best in the Kansas City area. Devin, I really appreciate you coming out, and I hope a lot of people see this and then they reach out to you, because everyone definitely needs a real estate attorney on their side if they're looking at buying or selling in the Kansas City area.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.